Thank you all for being here. We have a really exciting event today. My name is Alex Camarada. I am the president of Responsibility, our USPTO affinity group for disability awareness and action. Before we get started, I want to thank the team with Conference Services, who without their help and professionalism, we could not put on these events. And they've been great. We've done 3 events this past year, and they've always been wonderful. So particularly, I want to thank Tim Lupke, Courtney Hammonds, Melody Ashrafi, Driss Jameh, and John Jaquette. So this is a very exciting event for many reasons. For one, it's an important opportunity to showcase the creative talent that exists within the USPTO. I know that we're so focused on the technological and legal aspects sometimes that we forget that we have quite a few talented, creative individuals here. And today is one way we can show that. It's also an important opportunity for us to shine light on the sensitive subject of disability disclosure. And we are doing it today in a special way, with one of our own USPTO officers reading from his recently published book about coming to terms with his bipolar disorder while finding his creative drive. Every disability is different. Some are visible and some are hidden. Some change how we move and interact with the physical world, while others affect our ability to communicate in it. Others still affect how we think and feel. For every individual with a disability, there is a context shaped by an uncountable amount of life experiences, by our perceptions of ourselves, and sometimes most acutely, by society's perception of our disabilities. For anyone with a hidden disability, there is one question he or she faces in perpetuity, often in agony. Should I tell them? Committed, a memoir of the artist road, boldly answers that question. In 2010, while working as a lobbyist for a major copyright association, Patrick Ross conceived, planned, and headed out on a 5-week road trip across the country to interview artists of all types, from painters to songwriters, and then posted the edited recordings as a way to drum up support for a major piece of copyright legislation quietly making its way through Capitol Hill. However, it becomes clear in the very first pages of the book to both reader and to Patrick that this journey is more than pleasing his board of directors. Like Dante's Divine Comedy, our author descends into a personal inferno, reliving painful past experiences in between conversations with artists that trigger a hunger, but also a fear for a creative life. Ultimately, Patrick arises from the depths, having plumbed such memories and insights into a new and embraceable understanding of how his mind works. The voice in Committed is excruciatingly honest and personal, and yet it is not a confession or an invitation for moral evaluation. Like any artist, Patrick understands that what is necessary to telling a good story more than anything is truth. And when we tell good stories, we bring light and compassion to situations and conditions we previously did not understand, that we were ignorant of, or that we feared. So please join me in welcoming our own USPTO Deputy Chief Communications Officer and newly published author, Patrick Ross.
Thank you, Alex. Ooh, I guess you can hear me. Thank you so much for that. That was very moving, and you summarized the book very well. I don't really need to give a lot of framers, I don't think. And yes, thank you to the conference services and giving us a fire. We can actually have a fireside chat after I do the reading, which is very nice. And so Alex and I will chat a little bit, and then we'll open it up for a broader discussion. So in the interest of time, I'm going to just read 3 short excerpts from the book. And the issue of my bipolar disorder is one of several narrative lines in the book. So I've gone and selected elements that talk about that so we can frame it and have it appropriate for this discussion. The first short excerpt I'm going to read is from part 1 New England. It takes a little more than an hour to reach Portland, Maine. I arrive fueled by a jumbo Diet Coke, raspberry zingers, and a fierce determination to wrap up a long day. Driving isn't a problem, it is a source of joy. Being behind the wheel affords me complete control of both my present and my immediate future, the power of hundreds of horses and thousands of pounds of steel bending to my will. But I have little strength today to continue maintaining a journalistic distance with my interview subjects. Quaint, three-story Federal-style buildings at Portland's Commercial Street greet me, each decked in matching red brick. Retail establishments occupy the first floor, and what I assume are residences sit atop. A jewelry store is followed by an art gallery next to a wine bar. A sandwich board outside poses a query for me. Do you have Maine on the brain? But the harbor town charm glides off of me, an impressionistic blur. Equally out of focus is my visit to Brian Fitzgerald at his photography studio on the third floor of a weathered brick warehouse. I realized once I'm in his studio that there's much to like about Brian. He's engaging, helpful. He arranges his studio lights and reflectors to improve the video shoot, and quick to share. We have a lot in common. We are both husbands and fathers. We both grew up in Arizona. We both spent most of our careers in journalism. He has a lot to say about running his own commercial photo business so he can free up time for personal photography of a more creative nature. I have lived that life. My first job after college was for a U.S. senator, a backbencher who in later years would go on to become the body's majority leader. I was not yet being treated for bipolar disorder, and I repeatedly failed to project sanity to my coworkers. So I left the job after 2 years to work from home as a freelance writer and editor. That kept me physically separated from my clients, allowing me to better feign mental health by phone and fax. Not too long after that transition, I was diagnosed and started on lithium. And a short while after that, my mother cut me out of her life, upset in part at me having married. She hadn't gotten over her frustration that I had refused the generous amount of cash she had offered me the day before the wedding to call the whole thing off. The absence of my mother's critical eye and the clear mind medication provided me combined with the flexible nature of my workday to encourage me to pursue creative writing. It was during this period that I first began to write a novel, yet I remained cognizant of the risk of creative pursuit, of a possible descent into behavior oscillating from expressed hostility to a refusal to leave bed. That was my mother's creative pattern, but also the means in which my diagnosis would manifest. I have found over the years that the best way to reduce the risk of such extreme behavior is to channel and control my creativity. I abandoned creative writing in my early 20s after 3 years when I called my mother to reconcile because my then wife was pregnant with Marisa. I control my creative impulses now by channeling them into fulfilling the agenda of my board of directors. I see so much of myself in Brian, but perhaps that is why I find myself wanting to leave. Once I have sufficient footage, I move on, declining his invitation to join him and his wife for dinner. The path to my motel means I need to cross the Fore River, but the drawbridge spanning Casco Bay is up. In front of me, an elderly man in an aging sedan honks. I'm not sure what he's hoping to accomplish. None of us can move, not until that drawbridge is lowered. Surely he sees the flashing light to our right, informing us of this fact. It's possible he can't see the drawbridge, though. I can't. There are too many cars and too much development. I feel restrained, held back, as motionless as the Korean War statue I saw this morning in Averill. I run my usual self-diagnostic, looking for racing thoughts, checking to see if I have growing rage that is not proportional to my situation. I don't believe I'm becoming manic. Perhaps I see more today what is wrong with my life and how I also lack any insight on how to improve it. And so I sit, waiting for that unseen drawbridge to move. I'm staring ahead at an obstruction I know is there, and yet it remains frustratingly beyond my line of sight. The second of the 3 short segments is from part 4 of the book, The South, about halfway through. A context point for here, I am again estranged from my parents at the time of this trip, and they live in Knoxville. My itinerary on this trip charts a convoluted circumnavigation of Knoxville, Tennessee. That was not my intention, at least not consciously. The pattern of the southeastern leg on a map resembles a pyramid-shaped glass beaker, with Knoxville, the inert but toxic gas, hovering in its center. Here in Oxford, Mississippi, I am located along the Beaker's base. I'm hoping a stroll across the sunlit University of Mississippi campus will clear my head of such thoughts. I approach the school's imposing football stadium and am passed by 3 smiling sprites, each with teeth blinding white and teased hairstyles in various shades of the Caucasian spectrum, yellow, red, and brown. Giggles accompany their aerial skips, while crimson gym bags sporting a familiar corporate swoosh swing at their sides. I assume they are cheerleaders. A sign says the stadium is named after 2 men, Vaught and Hemingway, but I'm disappointed to learn the latter is not the late great novelist. I peer through chain link fencing at 60,000 empty seats and think how all I heard on the radio into town, being trapped as I am at listening to local radio stations with my music player dead, was hyperactive discussions about the impending start of the college football season and how this year Ole Miss's fortunes would turn around. I stand before the uniting presence of Oxford, Mississippi, and almost hear the cheers. While in college, I studied abroad at the other Oxford in England. I had not yet been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but it had manifested years earlier. My time in England consisted of deep depression, punctured by an occasional burst of angry mania. I'd arrived a young man raised under the blue dome of the Arizona desert. In England, the days grew shorter, while the sun remained hidden behind a perpetual blanket of clouds. I now know, thanks to my psychiatrist, that I also suffer from a condition called seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. Lack of exposure to sunlight triggers my bipolar symptoms. I no longer make an effort to hide my struggle with SAD. I have learned it as a condition accepted by society. Many boast of having it, diagnosed or not. But we do not similarly embrace bipolar disorder. I no longer watch police procedural TV shows because all too often the serial killer shares my disorder. I've never seen a show in which a madman slits the throats of beautiful young women because cloudy days are activating his SAD. At Oxford, I self-medicated with repeated pints of bitter at the Rose and Crown pub. One night in a stone hall, similar to what King Arthur would have used to meet with his knights of the Round Table, I shocked and embarrassed my fellow students by loudly accusing one of the Oxford Dons, sponsoring our program, of conspiring to send me back home. I stormed out before he could respond and didn't stop until I reached a fountain where I engaged in dry heaves, too wound up to vomit properly. Actually gets a little lighter in that chapter. I interview a delightful mother and artist named Amy Evans Streeter. So now for the last segment, we will skip. We're in the last part of the book, part 6, the West. And I'm driving north from Salt Lake City on my way to Boise, Idaho. I don't believe it at first. I lean forward over the car's dash, as if being closer to the front windshield will allow me to see further. Then I check all of my mirrors and turn to look over my right shoulder. I'm truly alone. For the first time on this trip, I am the only vehicle visible in any direction. On this empty Idaho highway, I am one with the asphalt and the scrub brush. A siren breaks my reverie. In my driver's side mirror, I spot a highway patrol car emerge from the gully between the westbound and eastbound lanes of I-84. I pull over and he stops behind me. Now nothing is in motion except a tumbleweed far ahead in the distance. This is my first speeding ticket of the trip, but I take it from the officer with grace. I'm tempted to tell him that going 89 miles per hour endangered no one but myself. But there is no use in doing so, and besides, the speed limit here is 75, which is fast enough. I'm eager now to get where I want to be, but that doesn't mean I need travel without restraint. Imposing a bit of sanity on my journey won't hinder my eventual arrival. The officer returns to his patrol car to its hiding place like a crouching tarantula while I resume my driving. More tumbleweeds appear, many more. The strong wind reminds me of my drive across Nebraska, but the parched landscape here produces not fields of golden crops, but rather brown flora corpses moving east in a steady migration. A large spiky sphere resembling a skeletal snowman base whisks in front of my car and I swerve, narrowly missing it. Another arrives, then 2. I bob and weave across the 2 lanes of highway, careful not to end up in a ditch that is deep enough to camouflage a highway patrol car. Soon the tumbleweeds prove too numerous, and one strikes my car's grille with a combination of a thud and a pop. Twigs snap and whish onto my windshield. I flinch. But that was it. Thud, pop, whish. No harm done. It's fun, actually. Now, still alone on the road, I aim my 2 tons of steel directly at the zombies. More thuds and pops and wishes. I'm living a video game. Then the leader of this migrating brush pride approaches, spiky tendrils emerging from its base that are almost as wide as my car's front grille. I must take him out. I dig back deep into my brain to high school algebra and imagine the train that leaves for Pittsburgh and the other train that leaves for Cleveland and the varying speeds they must reach in order to pair up in Buffalo. I calculate the hypotenuse between me and my prey, imagining us meeting at the right angle of the triangle. A gust increases my foe's speed. I accelerate to meet it. And I do. There's no thud this time. It's more of a boom, a rippling force of sound that chills and excites me. I am blinded momentarily by the spray of limbs that scatter across my windshield. When I can see again, two tendrils extend up from my grill, aimed out away from each other like a longhorn hood ornament. This is my trophy, the record of my kill. I didn't just take out the dried up remains of a land in drought. I obliterated parts of myself. I leveled the man who surrendered his creativity to a lobbying cause. I demolished the young adult paralyzed by fear of mental illness. And like a patient sniper, I took out that child who couldn't create without his mother's approval. Thank you.